What you're witnessing now is a game that sparked the downfall of an entire franchise, and that franchise is none other than the Houston Astros, even led by the fantastic trio of Roger Clemens, Roy Oswalt, and Andy Pettitte. They could not bring home the first World Series in franchise history, as they lost the 2005 World Series to the Chicago White Sox. Just 5 years later, the team has hit rock bottom, now led by a washed-up 35-year-old Carlos Lee and whoever else they could find, basically on the streets. It's hard to believe, but this team was built back up and turned into a dynasty for years to come. But how did they do it? In 2011, the Astros rolled out a star-studded lineup led by the aforementioned Carlos Lee. Hunter Pence was also a young star that fans could come out and watch. Not for long, though. 2011 also brought the debut of an infield prospect, Jose Altuve. He was not a top prospect by any means and was only given playing time after the team was dismantled from what it once was, and there was plenty of open spots to fill. The pitching staff was even less exciting. Top prospect Jordan Lyles was the guy who was supposed to turn this staff around, and he was given that chance in 2011. It did not go as planned. Finishing last in the NL Central for the first time since 1991, the season was a complete disaster, as expected. Pitching-wise, the top two were Wandy Rodriguez and Mark Melancon. Neither of them put up eye-popping numbers, but they were the best nonetheless. At the trade deadline, Hunter Pence, who put up 3.5 BWAR in just the first half of the season, was traded to the Phillies for a package headlined by top infield prospect Jonathan Singleton and top pitching prospect Jared Cozart. Veteran Michael Bourne was also sent packing, bringing back an additional pool of prospects, although none of them as big as Singleton and Cozart. As for most rebuilding teams, the most exciting part of the season was the draft. And with the 11th overall pick, the Astros selected outfielder George Springer out of UConn. Profiled as an outfielder with a rare combo of power and speed, most scouts put a low ceiling on him, but many agreed that he had a high floor coming out of college. By the end of the season, Baseball America had their top three prospects as Singleton, Cozart, and Springer. All three were just acquired in this season, and the farm system was beginning to improve. In the offseason, a new GM was brought in, Jeff Lanau. An analytics-oriented GM was maybe just what this team needed to get the rebuild done properly. Mark Melancon was traded to Boston after his solid season in the closer role in 2011. It's very common to see bottom-of-the-barrel teams move their top relievers for prospects, considering they don't need to be worrying about closing out tight games in the late innings. In return came shortstop Jed Lowry. Veteran catcher Humberto Quintero was traded for minimal return, but that was a move to open up a spot for Jason Castro, former first-round pick of the Astros. The lineup going into 2012 was not looking any more promising. A former 20th-round pick in J.D. Martinez finds a starting spot after slugging his way through the minors. Recent acquisition Jed Lowry, Jordan Schaefer from the Michael Bourne trade, and Justin Maxwell all slide into starting roles for the first time in Houston. And the former first-round pick Jason Castro does get into the lineup after recovering from a knee injury. Pitching-wise, Lucas Harrell, who was claimed off waivers in the offseason, joins the staff. Not many other changes were made, and as expected, there were similar results in 2011. An abysmal record, horrible team stats, and few bright spots are all valid ways to describe this season. Just 55 wins were recorded by this team, led by Jed Lowry and Justin Maxwell. Once again, a top pitcher is a reliever, as the starting pitching was one of the worst in the league. Top prospect Jordan Lyles can't figure anything out, and waiver claim Lucas Harrell is the best pitcher. Not a good sign. Once again, the draft was a top priority, as it should be, since they held the highly coveted first overall pick. The Astros ended up selecting Carlos Correa, a Puerto Rican shortstop. The pick was considered highly risky at the time, and many scouts criticized the team for not selecting the safe option in Mark Appel. We'll go into more detail on both of these guys a little later. The trade deadline was also a very active one for the front office. Carlos Lee was shipped to the Marlins for a package headlined by former first-rounder Matt Dominguez. J.A. Happ and others were sent to the Blue Jays for a package headlined by first-rounder Joe Musgrove, and Wandy Rodriguez was sent off to Pittsburgh for Robbie Grossman and others. Adding Correa and all the prospects from the trade deadline continue to make this farm system look better and better, and as a result, the Major League roster gets worse and worse. The offseason leading up to the 2013 season was pretty mediocre, to say the least, but it's not like they had many other players to trade. Closer Wilton Lopez was traded for nobody notable, and a slew of unexciting free agency signings were made. The biggest move would probably be trading Jed Lowry, one of the few Major League level players in the organization, to Oakland for veteran power-hitting first baseman Chris Carter and prospects Brad Peacock, a pitcher, and Max Stassi, a catcher. Also notable was they moved divisions to the AL. Finally, now the AL and NL had equal amount of teams, 15 and 15, and statistically, they had a better chance at making the playoffs considering they only had a 5-team division instead of having play in a 6-team division like they were before. The lineup for 2013 was as follows. Exciting new faces included top prospect Jonathan Villar, along with newcomers from trades. Brandon Barnes gets his shot as a former 6th-round pick by the Astros. Spoiler alert, he does not do well. Eric Bedard joins the rotation along with a young Dallas Keuchel, who had a short stint in the majors in 2012 but did not do well at all. But since we're talking about the 2013 Astros, he gets a spot in the rotation as well. The bullpen has some new faces, but they are not good. 2012 was bad and the roster only got worse, so 2013 is also going to be bad. 51 wins was all the team could manage. A pair of first-rounders led the team in Castro and Dominguez, but nobody else really wanted to help. Pitching-wise, 2 guys who did not start the year with the team were leading the way. Highly touted prospect Jared Cozart dazzled in his first 60 innings, maybe showing that Hunter Pence trade is going to pay off, and Brett Oberholzer, who was acquired in the Michael Bourn trade, also showed some promise in a small sample size. The overall team stats were hard to look at, but that is not what this season's about. The real interest is once again the MLB draft, as they hold the first overall selection for the 2nd straight year. The Astros need to build this team from the ground up, and they said nobody better to lead this team than Mark Appel. The same Mark Appel that they passed on the year before, who failed to sign after being drafted. Nobody knew it at the time, but Appel would go down as one of the biggest busts of all time, never even playing a game in an Astros uniform. Some minor trades happened during the trade deadline, shipping out the closer for the 34th year in a row, it feels like, along with minor pieces Bud Norris and Justin Maxwell. They got Danry Vasquez, LJ Hose, Josh Hader, and Kyle Smith in 3 separate deals. Heading up to the 2014 season, JD Martinez did not make the Major League roster and was released because GM Jeff Linnell thought once players hit age 26, they will not improve. At least, that's what the analytics suggested. JD struggled his first few years in the league. Hindsight is 2020, but it's not like he was holding the team back. The whole team was horrible, so giving him one more year wouldn't have hurt the team too much. It's probably what they should have done, as he signed with the Tigers and put up an OPS plus of 155 in 2014. A new outfielder's rolled out as top prospect George Springer gets his first crack at it, along with Jonathan Singleton in the infield. The pitching staff was finally looking like something that a major league team could use, as Cozart and Oberholzer both are promising, and waiver wire pickup Colin McHugh could prove to be serviceable. Feldman was picked up in free agency, along with Qualls and Sipp. The team wasn't that bad on paper, and if Singleton and Springer live up to the hype, this team could definitely be around 500. As we know, only one of those players lived up to the hype, and they didn't go 500, but they did go 432. That's good for this team, okay? Let them have their moment. Breakout star Jose Altuve led the team with a 5.5 B-WAR after showing flashes in previous years. George Springer put up a solid showing in his time in the majors, and the offense had something to build around now. On the pitching side, breakouts in Keuchel and McHugh also gave this team a boost. Solid starting pitching was far gone from the Astros organization, having to go back to Roy Oswalt to see anything like that. And Keuchel put together a tremendous season. In addition to the team doing better, they also had the first overall pick again. They decided they were going to make 2 bad picks in a row, and they chose Brady Aiken. Shortly after the draft, they discovered issues with his UCL, which, if you don't know, is a pretty important body part for pitchers, and they chose not to sign him. Failing to sign the number 1 pick is very embarrassing. The Astros, however, were used to embarrassment by now, so don't feel too bad for them. The trade deadline this year consisted of 1 trade, and that was sending away Jared Cozart for Jake Marisnick and Colin Moran. Colin Moran was the big piece of that trade, the 6th overall pick from the 2013 draft. Although Cozart was a promising pitcher, the Astros decided to take a shot on Moran. The first of the first overall picks, Carlos Correa, was ready for his time in the big leagues. Jonathan Villar put up an OPS plus under 80, and Correa was looking like a star in the minors. Out with the old and in with the new. Jake Marisnick also joined the lineup, adding a much-needed defensive upgrade. Gaddis was acquired in a trade for Mike Foltynewicz, and Valbuena was swapped for Dexter Fowler. Lance McCullers, the pick after Carlos Correa in the 2012 draft, joined the team this year, continuing to strengthen the rotation. At the trade deadline in 2015, this time they were buyers. They had a strong record in the first half on the backs of top prospects Carlos Correa and George Springer. They traded away notable players in Domingo Santana, Adrian Hauser, Brett Phillips, and Josh Hader to the Brewers for Carlos Gomez and Mike Fiers. Adding 2 proven veterans to this talented young team could be the missing piece in the puzzle. In the draft, they had the rare privilege to have 2 top 5 selections. Because they were unable to sign Aiken from the year prior, they were given the second pick as compensation. With the second pick, they chose Alex Bregman out of LSU, who was profiled as the best all-around player in the draft. And with the fifth, they selected Kyle Tucker, who was profiled as the best high school hitter in the class. Let's just say it might have been a good thing that they didn't sign Aiken. By the end of the season, they had won 86 games. Correa lived up to the hype. Springer continued to improve. Keuchel decided he wanted to go out and win the Cy Young, so he did. And McHugh was a solid number 2 behind him. Although the team was good, it still wasn't built for a deep playoff run as they lost in the ALDS to the Royals. The top prospects were doing well, and they were helped by a couple of breakout stars in Keuchel and McHugh. In the offseason leading up to the 2016 season, they went all out. Not only did they still have Carlos Gomez and Mike Fiers from the 2015 trade deadline, they signed Doug Fister in free agency and made a trade for a closer. Yes, they made a trade for a closer, sending Brett Oberholzer, who had shown promise, along with top prospects Vince Velasquez and Mark Appel, among others, to the Phillies for Ken Giles. Giles was coming off back-to-back sub-2 ERA seasons, and he was just 24 years old. They had to give up the former number 1 pick Mark Appel, but he had struggled in the minors, and the Astros were ready to move on. This team was primed to improve on last season and make a deep playoff run and a shot at their first World Series title. The team got off to a slow start and were never able to recover. In the draft, they selected Forrest Whitley at pick number 16, and at the deadline, they made a few minor moves, trading Josh Fields away to the Dodgers for minor leaguer Yordan Alvarez, and traded Scott Feldman to the Blue Jays for Guadalupe Chavez. Those trades probably won't matter at all. Carlos Gomez also struggled mightily. He probably could have been told what pitch was coming and would still miss it. He was released in August. They ended the season with 84 wins and missed the playoffs. Altuve and Correa put up phenomenal seasons, but it wasn't enough to pull this team out. The pitching especially let them down, as the top 2 pitchers by WAR were both relievers, and once again that is not a good sign. Ken Giles did not perform as expected, and all of a sudden, the Astros were stuck. What were they to do? Charlie Morton. They signed him. They signed Charlie Morton. They also granted Jason Castro, Doug Fister, Colby Rasmus, and Luis Valbuena free agency, which are all kind of addition by subtraction, as they all had struggled the year prior and were not expected to do anything productive this season. They signed Josh Reddick in free agency, and they also added Carlos Beltran to fill the DH role. Yuli Gurriel earned the starting job after being acquired a year earlier, and this was a minor offseason for the team, and most people weren't expecting too much of an improvement, but they had a young team and some stars that were ready to break out. They traded away Teoscar Hernandez for Francisco Liriano, who never did anything for the Stros, but Brad Peacock, who was acquired in the trade for Jed Lowry, made his way into the rotation. Top draft pick 2 years prior, Alex Bregman was also ready to get his shot. Altuve, Correa, Springer, and Bregman led the offense to one of the best offensive seasons in the decade. Dallas Keuchel had another phenomenal season, and Brad Peacock pitched very well behind him. Oh, and to add on to it, they traded for Justin Verlander at the trade deadline, winning 101 games and the World Series. Or did they? All was going well until 2 years down the road, Mike Fiers came out and put an asterisk on that title. I think we all know the story by now, but the Astros were stealing signs illegally, and the batter knew what pitch was coming. Would they have won the World Series without it? We'll never know. This team was still very talented, but you can't just say this is a successful rebuild because they cheated. So we're not going to count it. The draft this year also didn't go very well. J.B. Bukowskis was their first overall selection, and the most notable pick was round 21, where they selected Chas McCormick. The offseason was a very productive one. Very productive. Trading for Garrett Cole from the Pirates, giving away promising talents like Joe Musgrove and Colin Moran. Adding Garrett Cole to this already stacked rotation made this team scary. Coming off a World Series win, and at the time, nobody knew about the sign-stealing scandal, so many thought they were going to be even better. The year started off well, and it kept going well. They acquired Roberto Ozuna at the trade deadline from the Jays for Ken Giles and prospects. Thinking they needed even more pitching help, they brought in Ryan Presley from the Twins at the deadline as well. You can never have too many quality arms, and I think the Astros understood that. The numbers were off the charts, one of the best pitching stats we've seen in history, and Alex Bregman played at an MVP level. But they ran into the buzzsaw that was the 2018 Boston Red Sox and Mookie Betts in the ALCS, and they ended up losing the series 4-1. In the mix of all that, the draft took place, and in the first round they selected Seth Beer, and in the third they chose Jeremy Pena, both college players that could help the team sooner rather than later. The offseason was a rather quiet one for the team this year. Signing Robinson Chirinos, Michael Brantley, and Wade Miley was the extent the team went to in free agency. Dallas Keuchel was also lost to free agency, but this team didn't need to do much. The core that they had built already was still so young and could even improve on the 103-win season from last year. To nobody's surprise, they did. Alex Bregman proved to be one of the best hitters, if not the best hitter in the league, only losing the MVP to Mike Trout. Springer excelled, Correa of course excelled, even Josh Reddick put up the best season of his career. And remember that guy they got for Josh Fields a couple of trade deadlines ago? Yordan Alvarez? Yeah, he's good, really good. And that's just the offense. The pitching was arguably even better, led by the AL Cy Young Justin Verlander, followed closely by Garrett Cole and Brad Peacock. At the trade deadline, they even traded for Zach Greinke, giving up Corbin Martin, Seth Beer, J.B. Bukauskas, and Josh Rojas. Included in that trade were 2 first-round picks, Seth Beer and Bukauskas. To get Zach Greinke, you're going to have to give up some top-tier prospects. They also acquired catcher Martin Maldonado, as Robinson Chirinos was not living up to what they had hoped for when they signed him. But I don't think Chirinos dragged them down too much, as this team put up 107 wins. They led the league in most of the major statistical categories and were the favorite to win the World Series. Representing the NL were the 93-win Washington Nationals, a team who was definitely worse on paper. In the playoffs, however, they had a record of 8-2 and gave the Astros a good run for their money. The Nationals took games 1 and 2, putting up 12 runs in Game 2 in a game that Justin Verlander started. The Astros were close to the same result from just a year ago, a great regular season, a promising run in the playoffs just to lose it all. But these aren't the 2012 Astros, this is the 2019 Astros, and they had a different plan. The team sent out Zach Greinke for Game 3, and he delivered, pitching 4.2 innings, allowing 1 run, and the loaded bullpen shut out the Nationals, resulting in a final of 7-1. Game 4, manager A.J. Hinch gave the ball to Jose Urquidy, a 24-year-old rookie. With just 41 innings pitched in the regular season, it was a questionable decision. If you could hold this team down for just a few innings and get the win, the Stros would be able to turn the ball over to the top of this rotation for Games 5, 6, and 7. And he did deliver. Even on the brightest stage, the 24-year-old pitched 5 shutout innings, only allowing 2 hits, and once again the Astros allowed only 1 run in the entire 9-inning game. Now the series was tied back to 2 games apiece. Game 5 saw the pitching matchup of Garrett Cole versus Joe Ross after Max Scherzer was scratched after bunting a ball into his face before the game. Garrett Cole dominated in his 7 innings, allowing just 1 run while striking out 9. The pitching is what got this team here and is what will win them this World Series. Game 5 belonged to the Astros, now only a game away from the first official World Series without cheating. All they had to do was win 1 game at home as they head back to Houston for the final 2 games of the 7-game series. Game 6 was a different story. Steven Strasburg was on the mound for the Nats, and after watching the Astros pitching staff dominate his team, he was out for revenge. He pitched 8 1/3 innings, allowing 2 runs on 5 hits while striking out 7. The Nats won this one 7-2, setting up a Game 7. In front of their own fans, the Astros could go out and win it all. Max Scherzer on the mound for Washington coming back from injury, and Zach Greinke for Houston. 2 of the greatest of this generation battling it out in a game to decide it all. The bats were quiet initially until Yuli Gurriel launched a solo home run in the 2nd, and adding on in the 5th was Carlos Correa with an RBI single to stretch the lead to 2-0. Zach Greinke pitched a 1-2-3 6th, and it was starting to look good for the home crowd. Greinke came back out in the 7th, but didn't last long. Anthony Rendon took him deep, and he walked the next batter. Out of the bullpen came Will Harris to try to preserve the lead. With 35-year-old Harry Kendrick up, there wasn't much worry of him taking the lead with 1 swing, as he had just over 100 home runs in his 15-year Major League career. He's not known for his power. He's really only known for one thing, and that one thing is this moment.
176 against him. That's down the right field line into the corner. This ball is gone for a home run!
The Astros were now down 3-2 with just 9 outs to work with. They went scoreless in the 7th and 8th and gave an additional run up in the top of the 9th. Daniel Hudson came out and got Springer to pop up, struck out Altuve, and finally striking out Michael Brantley. The Astros had lost. Adding insult to injury, the news of the sign-stealing scandal had just broke, and now everyone treats the Astros as the World Series-less franchise that they once were. A new general manager and manager were chosen, James Click and Dusty Baker. 2020 was a bad year for just about everyone, including the Houston Astros. They had lost Garrett Cole, Colin McHugh and Wade Miley all to free agency. In the pandemic-shortened season, Justin Verlander had to get Tommy John surgery and was set to miss all of the 2021 season. They lost in the playoffs after a surprising run to the ALCS. What 2020 did bring, though, is the acquisitions of Kyle Tucker, Christian Javier, and a full 60-game season of Jose Urquidy, as well as a full 60-game season of Framber Valdez. Javier, Urquidy, and Valdez, a young trio of starting pitchers who all had shown promise in the past and continue to improve into the 2020 season. Losing Garrett Cole to free agency and JV to injury put a big dent in the once great pitching staff. They had also lost George Springer, an integral part to their success in the past. The new additions fared pretty well as Tucker and Javier shined. Lance McCullers also pitched very well now that he had the chance to lead a rotation. To add to that, 26-year-old Framber Valdez also took a big step forward, pitching to a 3.14 ERA in 134 innings. They found their way back to the World Series after winning 95 games, and they ended up losing in 6 games. Without the dominant pitching staff of years prior, they just weren't able to keep up. This offseason, the Astros lost some key pieces. Carlos Correa, Justin Verlander, Kendall Graveman, and Brooks Raley were all lost to free agency. Luckily, they were able to re-sign Verlander back, but he's 39 years old, coming off a Tommy John surgery, so the expectations were understandably low. Prospect Jeremy Pena was expected to fill the role of Carlos Correa at short, and former 21st round pick Chas McCormick was set to start in center. The core of Correa, Springer, and Bregman was down to just its final leg, and that was Alex Bregman. It was not looking too good on the offense. The pitching staff had a lot of bright young talent, but none of them were proven consistent starters. The window to win a World Series without cheating was closing rapidly, if not already closed. If they wanted this season to go well, they would need Tucker to keep improving, Altuve and Bregman to get back coming off some down years. They would need Jeremy Pena to fill in for Correa. And from Valdez, Urquidy, Garcia, and Javier, at least one of them would need to be a dependable, top-of-the-rotation guy, since Verlander definitely won't be able to do that coming off a Tommy John surgery at the age of 39. What if I told you all of that happened, and more? Hey, remember that guy they got for Josh Fields a couple of trade deadlines ago? Yordan Alvarez? He's still good. Oh, and Justin Verlander, the 39-year-old, coming off of Tommy John surgery, won the Cy Young. Kyle Tucker put up numbers similar to Springer, and Jeremy Pena held his own at short. They won 106 games and the first seed in the American League. They had the Mariners in the first round, who are babies in the playoffs. Literally, they haven't been to the playoffs since 2001. The Astros swept them pretty easily. Then they had the Yankees, who have been notoriously bad in the playoffs recently, and they went ahead and swept them as well. Now 7-0, heading into the World Series, they matched up against the Philadelphia Phillies. It was looking like 2019 all over again. They were facing the hot underdogs led by star Bryce Harper. Game 1 was a 10-inning thriller that JT Realmuto won with a home run in the top of the 10th. Not wanting a repeat of 2019, the Astros battled back and won Game 2 with Valdez pitching a stunning 6.1 inning performance, only giving up 1 run with 9 Ks. With the series tied at 1-1, Game 3 held a lot of power. Lance McCullers got the ball, and he didn't last long. He gave up 7 runs in just 4 innings, and the Astros couldn't even score 1 run. They lost the game 7-0. In Game 4, Christian Javier finally got his chance in the big game, and he took advantage of it, throwing 6 innings, allowing no hits, and just 2 walks while striking out 9. The three-headed monster of Brian Abreu, Rafael Montero, and Ryan Presley closed out the combined no-hitter as they won 5-0, beating Phillies ace Aaron Nola. Verlander had the ball in Game 5 and kept it for 5 innings, turning it over to the bullpen, who finished off another win after Jeremy Pena homered in the 4th. They found themselves in an eerily similar situation. Going back to Houston up 3-2 in the series, they just needed to win 1 more game, just like 2019 against the Nationals. Game 6 saw the matchup of Framber Valdez versus Zach Wheeler, a rematch of Game 2 which the Astros had won. Both pitchers had their best stuff and carried shutouts into the 6th inning. That, however, would change when Kyle Schwarber hit a solo home run to lead off the 6th inning. Framber wouldn't back down, though, as the 28-year-old struck out Harper to end the inning. Now pitching with a lead, Zach Wheeler hit the leadoff man Martin Maldonado in the bottom of the inning. After Altuve grounded into a fielder's choice and Jeremy Pena singled, runners were on the corners. Now let me ask you a question. You remember that guy who they got a couple trade deadlines ago for Josh Fields? Yordan Alvarez? Yeah, let me check. He's still good.
On a 2-1, Alvarez hits a high drive center field. Veer leans back. This game is turned upside down.
Phillies collapsed from there, and a walk, wild pitch, and single allowed another runner to score. Hector Neris shut down the 7th, Brian Abreu shut down the 8th, and Ryan Presley was called in to close out the 9th, to close out the first official World Series in Astros history. Now down to Nick Castellanos, who on the first pitch sent a ball into the air into foul territory. It stayed in play, and the Astros had finally done it. They had won the World Series while not cheating. Only 10 years after finishing last in the division, for the first time in 20 years, the Astros had built up one of the best teams in the league. Pena was named World Series MVP after putting up a 1.023 OPS through 6 games. This team is still fairly intact for the 2023 season as we look at the lineup here, and taking a look at the starting pitching, it looks like one of the best rotations in the league, putting them in a prime position to continue the dynasty.